Hi everyone, my name is Miss Reasso and I'm going to walk you through some helpful hints for Mat 152 lab on section 7.5 and 8.1. So this is going to focus on our central limit theorem and some of our confidence intervals, since that is what 7.5 and 8.1 cover. Keep in mind that you should be completing your work on this paper or inserting it into this document. Typed labs will not be accepted. All of your answers should be handwritten. Other than your notes, calculator, or reaching out to your instructor, you should not be receiving help from other people, electronics, tutors, or apps on the lab. And keep in mind that failure to complete questions with the method as directed will receive no credit for those questions, because some of them we want you to use specific methods. So on our first question here, it wants us to focus on our central limit theorem. So you are going to find your mu x bar and your sigma x bar. And you will use those answers to help you with the rest of this. Okay. So we will have the shape of our sampling distribution x bar over here. We want to say what type of distribution that is. And then on our curve over here, we want to label the values. So these should be numbers that we're labeling on our curve over here. So we're going to have our mu x bar, and then we are going to add and subtract our standard deviations for our sampling distribution from that. Okay. Now remember, this is in 7.5, so go back to that if you're having some questions. Okay. Once we do that, we're going to make some conclusions about this. So do we think that a height of 6.42 would be an unusual value? Again, recall what unusual means here, so that'll be part of your explanation. And then we are going to go ahead and find what that probability is where we are looking for that. Again, numbers on this will be different because this is from a different semester. Be sure to also shade that area above. So you're going to plot it on the curve in part B and then shade the area that corresponds on part C. Be sure to show your work as well for this calculation. Question 2, this is where we start getting into our chapter 8. This is our definitions, so make sure you go back and reread some of these if you're not too sure about your definitions from your notes or your ebook. Okay. Now we're going to get into some confidence intervals. So for your confidence intervals, you may or may not be using the formula or a test. So you'll be told which one you want to use. If you're using the formula, you want to show your calculations and write down exactly what numbers you're using in the formula. For the critical values, make sure you're using the built-in function in the TI-84. So you should state which function you're using and the inputs that go in the function. And recall that those can be found under second vars. Okay. We want to make sure we round our critical values and our margin of error to 2 decimal places. You might be asked to use a test function in the calculator. I'll put a note here. Recall that those are in stat test, and you'll write down which test you are using and all of the inputs that go with that. So in either of these cases, your final answer should be 2 decimal places. Any explanation you give here should be incomplete sentences that are grammatically correct. Okay. And then here is the information you will be using in terms of numbers. Okay. So number 3 just wants you to answer how many inches the point estimate is, and then what is the point estimate for this confidence interval? What type of what type of mean is it? Okay. Now, for number 4, we're going to construct a confidence interval using a formula. Again, the number might be different here. So we're going to use our formula here. Be sure to go back to your notes to get the formula if you need it. And you should be finding the critical value on your calculator. Okay. You'll write the answer here for what you get for your interval and then your interpretation here. And then we're also going to calculate our width as well. For number 5, we're doing something similar, except we're going to use our calculator, one of the test functions in our calculator. So again, the number here might not be this, just keep that in mind. So you're going to say which function you used in the stat test, and then list the inputs that you type into the calculator. You'll put your answer here for your interval, do your interpretation, and then calculate the width of that interval. Question 6 wants us to compare what really is the difference between the two confidence levels that you have. So you're going to write your 2 answers for your confidence interval and the widths, and then you're going to make a comparison here. Okay. Now, at the end of 8.1, we talk about minimum sample size. So we are going to find our minimum sample size given the restrictions that we have for these problems. So again, make sure you're using the built-in function in that TI-84 to calculate the critical values, state which function you're using, and list the inputs. We want to make sure we round the critical values, which are z values, to 2 decimal places. Show all of your calculations, because we do have to use a formula when we're finding sample size, and write down the values that you're putting in that formula. And then we always round up our answer when we're calculating minimum sample size. So if we have 234.3, we'll still round that up. It doesn't matter that the 3 doesn't round up traditionally. We're talking about whole people, and we want to round up as opposed to rounding down for these problems. Okay, so we have a couple examples of those. There are 3 of them. And then you're going to compare what that means in terms of confidence interval versus margin of width and how that affects your sample size. And that is it for our 7.5 and 8.1 lab. Be sure to reach out to your instructor if you have any questions.